Alright, should be making a video and such. Guess we'll wait a second and then we'll do this live chat and pop out the chat, blah 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 blah. Alright, now I gotta clean that up. Good luck. Alright, that has to go up here, I guess. Maybe that. Ooh, what the hell's it doing now? I don't know. I won't pay any attention. And such. Alright, so I guess we'll start with a drawing of the basic argument, the mistake made, critical to this conversation, really, because this is, what it's really about is always something a little different than what it appears to be. It's not really the specific subjects of, well, the whole argument between this conservation of momentum and this argument that you can't conserve momentum if you have this kinetic energy theory thing, this 1/2 mv squared, because every time you conserve momentum and differentiate the masses, you either have to gratuitously destroy energy in some kind of manner, or you end up with a free energy circumstance that doesn't make any sense. And so it all started with gravity and the simple argument that because it's a time dependent force, that is, you're affected by it based on how long you are in it. And if you're in it and you're on a surface that's pushing back, even if it's an extension of the surface, some bizarre thing where here's the new surface that is pushing back, stopping you from free falling, then you're just gonna, the energy is just gonna go from gravity right into the ground, okay? So it doesn't affect you. But if you're disconnected and you're freely able to fall, you will collect the gravity, and it's been understood that it's 9.8 meters per second, okay? And that's it. It's 9.8 meters per second. It doesn't matter whether you fall at a natural rate or you have an existing velocity. Say you're a meteor and you're coming in at 10,000 miles an hour. If it takes you 1 second to travel, whatever, 10,000 miles or something, you'll get the same 9.8 meters. So if you're going 10,000 miles an hour, you'll only, in that second of traveling, like you would say from, I don't know, half the distance to the moon or something, it might take you 1 second if you're going, whatever, 90,000 miles an hour, or some kind of very fast speed. Well, it really won't be. Doesn't matter. The point is you're going 10,000 miles an hour, it's going to be a gigantic, 10,000 miles of distance, and that would be miles per second. So, but anyway, it's a lot of distance you're going to travel. You're going very fast, and all you're going to gain in that second is, you'll end up with 10,009.8. Okay, a tiny increase in your velocity from gravity. So when the space shuttle's coming down from being in orbit, it's really trying to get rid of its orbital velocity, not its gravitational velocity. Alright, so this goes to the fact that there's, Galileo did the experiments, blah blah blah, dissected this stuff, and it just turns out, okay, that because of how gravity works, there's this 1:3:5 ratio of how you start increasing speed in free fall. And the simple truth is that if you launch something at a speed, 10 miles per hour, and then you launch it at 20, you'll go 4 times higher, right? So way off the board. I guess I could tilt that up. Yeah, see that? Way up there. This is even a little shorter. Sorry. I'm a little, so you go 4 times the distance, okay, and all you did was increase your double your velocity. And the same happens when you drop things. So you drop it from 4 times the height, and you'll end up, okay, with twice the velocity, not 4 times the velocity. So the point is that it's just about time. This is the same unit of time, and this is the same unit of time. You could argue here, and you're getting this 3 part, okay, just out of velocity alone. So if you have the 20-mile-an-hour velocity, you'll travel through more space in 1 second. So this is 1 second, this is 1 second, let's say, and this is 1 second. It doesn't matter. It could be 1/2 second, it could be 1/4 second. Those proportions are the same. And this is just a simple fact. It's not, And so when something falls in gravity, okay, you go twice the height, it's only going to go twice the speed, okay, so it's twice the time. It's only going to be going twice the velocity when it lands. If I drop it from 4 times higher, it only goes twice the velocity. If I launch it, it's twice the velocity, I go 4 times higher. So it's only twice the velocity, okay. And the fact is we can weigh it. So we can drop something from 4 times higher, and it will only weigh, say if this weighs 10 pounds, it will only weigh 20 pounds. So it's only twice the weight, which is a huge correlation. I mean, weight is essentially energy, effectively. It's a weight that hits things. When something's moving, it's a weight that hits them. I mean, I've always said this, but I can create a horizontal weight by just taking a mass, okay, I'm moving it at a velocity, giving it a momentum, and bang it into something, and what the something is going to feel is the weight. It's going to be the same as if I invert it and let gravity do it. I can give something a velocity. So that's all it's hitting it, is momentum. So you can clearly, it's not complicated at all in the sense that I just described a circumstance. This is the way it works. It's only 2 times the times, 2 times the velocity, 2 times the weight, and there's absolutely no way to reasonably convert that into that equals 4x the energy. It just doesn't make any sense. I don't know why people are doing it. It doesn't. You can logically understand the catch, all right, that gravity is like a rain and you have to be in it and collect it, and just how big your bucket is, your mass, will decide how much of it you collect, and you'll hit the ground with your combined weight and how much you collected in terms of the energy, the amount of rain in the bucket. And that's what you'll hit the ground with, and that's all there is. There isn't any other extra energy. So there's actually no counter argument. No one's denying this truth or this truth or this truth. So how are they coming up with this answer? Why does this make sense to them? 2, 2, 2, all over the place. And yet they keep saying 4 merely because it's 4 times the distance, when, logically you could understand that if I give something a velocity coming into Earth, the amount of they're going to gain from gravity is going to be less than the velocity that they've already got. And that's just a fact. And they're not going to gain a lot of energy from Earth's gravity if they're already going a velocity, any kind of substantial velocity. It'd be a tiny amount of extra energy they can collect. Those are all truths. They're facts. No counter argument of any kind has been there's no even glimmer of somebody dissecting this and explaining it somehow. No, it's per foot, it's per inch. It doesn't say 9.8 meters per second. It says 9.8 meters per meter. Wait, no, it doesn't do that, and that's not how it works. And it really is about how long you're free falling in it. It's going to decide how much energy you can collect from it. As soon as you hit anything that slows you down or stops you, well, that's just a sink. That's just taking the energy away, and you have to start over, kind of thing. And the end, yeah. So it shouldn't be. There shouldn't really be an argument. It's a done deal. It's it's obvious. There's just no room for this something of 4 times the energy because it looks like 4 times. It barely looks like it, frankly. But once you know the facts. But yeah, it goes 4 times the distance. That is impressive, I suppose. But you can understand that it's not gaining anything through that distance because of the time. It's only twice the time. I mean, I did the rolling object. I mean, that's a good example too, because it doesn't reach half its speed, right? So if you launch something up against gravity, it doesn't lose. It doesn't, this 20-mile-an-hour thing doesn't go 10 miles an hour until it's all the way up here. It doesn't go 10 miles in the middle, where you'd say that's the sensible place for it to going 10 miles an hour, half the distance. No, it's going 10 miles an hour 3/4 of the way up. And it's only this last quarter will be the same as this one. You'll be going 10 miles an hour at this location, and it'll do this, exactly what it does here, it's going to do here. These two things, these two events will be exactly the same. I mean, the process will be exactly the same here and here. And the catch is, this is actually the same as this. Okay, this huge distance is really the same amount of gravity, the same amount of pressure pushed against, the same amount of football players knocked down, the same manner. I mean, you can use different bowling pins knocked down. This is all the same here. This big distance is the same amount of work done as in this little distance. And that's the truth of the circumstance. So yes, you're going twice as fast. You're going to do twice the amount of time fighting the gravity. All right, but that's it. Just twice the time, 2 units of gravity. 9.8 meters for this whole thing, and then 9.8 meters for this. 1 second, 1 unit of time here, 1 unit of time here. Like I said, this is, how can somebody deny that anything I said here, I didn't say it very eloquently, but what's in error? There's no errors in what I'm saying here, and it's just plain fact that there's absolutely no reason to think something that weighs twice as much really weighs 4 times as much. It doesn't really weigh 4 times as much. It only weighs twice as much when it hits the ground. I mean, I've been making the argument over and over. No counter argument made at all. They just keep evading every one of these points. They won't address them. They won't deal with them. They won't talk about them. They won't say anything about how this momentum theory, okay, somehow flawed or broken. So, it's not much you can do with these kinds of cowards. All right, so we'll read some coward comments, because what else is there? And that's all there is, so that's all you can deal with is the counter argument in the form it's in. And the form it's in is just absolute shit from morons. So, we'll do some watching of the, the spectacle of the poo eating by these morons. Alright, so this completely, fake, despicable creep, Dispar. Hi, Ian. Thanks for the new video. Whatever that is. I've listened to his feedback, and here is a list of the flaws. So he puts that in minor quotes. He discovered. I didn't discover anything. I'm just observing. Now, if you can't make the same observations, I just say it just shows what a dullard and a moron you are. That, the very fact that you don't think there needs to be any precision, that he doesn't have to graph things properly in perspective, he doesn't have to show anything, it can be all in the dark, all of that is just fine with you. And I said, that's bad on you, shithead. You're not a defender of science, you're a defender of little tricks. Okay, plus some counter arguments. We didn't deal with any of those. So the number one counter argument is that they have 2 different experiments. Brozo did this essentially the same experiment. All he did was put a lever in the way, but the spring was providing all the energy. A spring. And his results are 174 degrees in opposite to this experiment, the one you're commenting on. So you have 2 experiments, completely contrary results. Brozo very close to 2 to 1. This moron very close to 1.4 or whatever you want to call that. Okay, 1.4 to 1. I mean, dramatically different answers to the same question. Okay, proposing in an experiment that have many features in common. and should be producing consistent and similar results. So what about that contradiction? Right in your face, contradiction. Will you tell us which experiment is worse, in terms of its flaws? Will you list how you would explain that contradiction? You cowardly piece of shit. Anyway, it's a mechanical release, not a quick release. Well, is it a real subject or isn't it? I mean, through all these videos, you haven't learned that one thing. I mean, I'll admit I didn't realize how important quick releases were until I started playing with these things. And then I started watching some other videos and whatnot, and you start to figure out why there are quick releases. Because, you have to be able to, especially the higher the pressure and the faster something's going to move, the more you have to guarantee that it's at liberty to do that moving. And releasing is a complicated thing. It's not, it doesn't take much thinking to think about the very fact that, you are going from complete friction to no friction. And you want to do that as efficiently as possible. So you're essentially just mocking the subject here, right? Pointing it out like, well, here's his frivolous and trivial complaints. Well, do you think it's important or don't you, shithead? I mean, could you pick a side and actually have a position? I mean, you think quick releases don't matter, even though you found out in your own experiments? Yeah, it really does matter. I mean, wow, what a piece of shit. Anyway, it would be a good idea to tie the springs together because they probably don't have the same spring constant. So I just pointed out there's something wrong if the springs are moving at different velocities. Okay, so that's a downside of not having springs connected or not using one single spring, is the fact that obviously the information about expanding has to be communicated between all the springs. And if they're not communicating with each other very well, they're not well connected, that you're just going to end up launching springs or moving pressure between one spring and another spring instead of moving it in one direction and another direction. So it is just a fact that he's using multiple springs. It's not anywhere close to an ideal circumstance. Can't you just concede that it would be better if it was one spring? I mean, shit. Again, so what are you defending here? I mean, what's your point? What are you defending? Okay, doing the experiments badly. And that's what science needs. Science needs experiments done not so ideally. Far less than ideally. I don't think it does. I think you have learned this very lesson. Your own errors and mistakes should have taught you by now that, it requires a little bit of precision. Frankly, in some cases, a lot of precision. All right. They might absorb the pressure unevenly. I guess that's unevenly. And you don't understand that as a possibility. That the very fact that the spring isn't mounted to the ground and the springs are 4 or 5 independent springs isn't a problem, says you. Okay. The half mass will go twice the velocity. Well, that's the statement, Gary. Well, duh. That's what science says. I'm just saying, unless you're going to explain how the lighter object means more energy goes into the ground, right? That somehow the ground feels more pressure pushing a lighter object than it feels pushing the heavier object. That somehow more energy went into the ground. I mean, can't you fuckers, you pieces of shit, actually say you either believe in conservation of momentum or you don't? Do you think you have an obligation to show the conservation of momentum in these systems? I mean, all the physicists say these systems, springs, magnets, whatever you use between objects, or however you store or release energy in collisions, that all of that will have to be conserved. You have to conserve the momentum. Do you believe it or not? I mean, you're just such weasels. Okay, I claim that what actual physics says, Professor Lewin said it. Okay, so I don't know why he's quoting that little piece. I mean, obviously that's not a specific argument to this specific experiment. It's just a statement about what real science says. Now, do you have some evidence that science doesn't say that? Could you show me a video where science doesn't say that? That you don't have to conserve momentum? Could you show me you don't have to conserve momentum video? Could you show me a paper? You could show me anything that demonstrates that science says lighter things mean the thing is heavier and more energy is lost to the ground or something. Some theory like that. Because no physicist says it. Oh, you're just such a weasel. Okay. Alright, you should show us up close the device that compresses the spring, your quick release device, to see how the quick release works. So again, these are points that shouldn't get answered. I mean, the way you've presented it, it's like, oh, don't even pay any attention. These are just Gary's complaints. You don't think it's a real issue that, you know, we should be able to scrutinize how the experiment was done. And he really provides no opportunity to do that. It's just a magic release system. You know, we don't see the springs. We don't see how much they're compressed. We don't get to see much. All right. There's a spring higher on the bar, so that's bullshit. Okay, what I said is when the spring is released, the springs are flying up the rod, so the springs clearly have more energy still in them, or they wouldn't be following the mass. So that's not ideal. That's what I said. Where you marked the first line on the board, it's not supposed to be there. I don't know what that even means. What I said is, if you're going to put a ruler behind something, it ought to be a rational ruler. That is, the inches ought to be the same distance. That's like sort of a minimum courtesy. So if we're going to compare two things, it's good to compare them on a ruler that's actually got some sort of, you know, ruler qualities that actually obeys what rulers are supposed to be. It's not just random lines. Alright. God, what a fucking cunt. Anyway, the springs aren't mounted to the floor. So again, shouldn't it be connected to the ground? I mean, isn't that the idea? Anyway, the lines that you marked on the board are not equally distant from each other. So again, I mean, it's just so obvious. The ruler you provided was a piece of shit. You couldn't just say that. And so, conclusion, the whole thing is shitty. So he's just giving this asshole Ian the excuse to not answer any of these points, because he's just mocking the points as if, oh, they don't mean anything, because he's saying the experiment's shitty. Well, it is science, okay? I mean, if you want to call it something, it is shitty science. I mean, you don't do it badly. You're supposed to do it the right way or don't do it at all. Yeah, well, that's sort of a principle in science. Alright, these are all good observations, but to be honest, no, you didn't ask for him to answer any of these points. Alright, I don't, you're just, because this is the part, right? These are good observations, but to be honest, I don't think we're talking about gigantic flaws, so it's all meaningless. Alright, we're talking little things, so you're opining on how important all of those subjects are because you're some sort of fucking expert, when you're obviously not. And you pretend I'm humble and I'm just sitting here observing and learning. No, you're not. You're opining pretty aggressively, frankly. All right, we're talking little things, as if you corrected these errors, then suddenly it would go 4x higher. No, suddenly it would look just like Brozo's experiment. So that's the argument. You have two contradicting experiments. So he ignored me pointing that out. So that's not on this little bullet point. Oh, your experiment completely contradicts Brozo's experiment. Brozo very close to 2 to 1. This asshole close to 1.4. You don't see a problem there. You lying sack of shit. Yeah. All right. So yeah, I'm just saying that one of them has to be right, one of them has to be wrong. One of them has to be closer to a truth, and one of them is really far from a truth. So how did Brozo get it so far wrong if 1.4 is right? Or how did Ian get it so wrong if Brozo's experiment was right? And again, let's understand, Brozo promised a redo of that experiment 3 weeks ago, and we haven't seen it yet because it was proven. He proved it already. He's got it in the can. The experiment came out perfect, but he won't show us. Why? Because exactly as I state, because all he did was break the experiment. All right. Okay, 4x higher. Now that would be a gigantic difference. Well, the difference already exists. So I'm just saying, would you please explain the contradiction between Brozo's billiard ball experiment and Ian's results? They're in almost complete contradiction. Left almost all the way to right. All right. Now that would be a gigantic difference, which would prove that your flaws are gigantic. But anyways, yeah, that's the whole point. I don't mean, you've already seen it in your own experiments. I'm just saying, so this moron did a bunch of experiments, came up with all kinds of different results depending on how he did the experiment. So he has his own personal experience where he got gigantic differences in the outcome by making little stupid mistakes. And he still hasn't learned anything. So he says he's here to learn, and yet he hasn't learned anything. So, he gave Ian the out, and Ian took it and ran with it. Okay, thanks for listing these for posterity, Dispar. So he's not going to address any of the subjects. He's just going to say for posterity, he's going to look good. So it's going to look good that he ignored every one of these points, plus the rest of the points I did make in the video that aren't listed here, like the contradiction with Brozo's experimental results. Okay, and with every other experimental result, frankly, that you can find on the internet. I don't think he really thinks that it would go to the stratosphere. No, I stated exactly that it should go 4 times the height because it should have twice the velocity. And if you say it doesn't have twice the velocity, you have to explain why the momentum wasn't conserved. That's all I'm stating. Now, you can't address that simple argument. You won't address it, you can't address it, you evade it and pretend you're right. Well, this is for posterity. This is why science sucks. This is why it's broken. It's because of exactly the asshole you are. Okay? You don't take any responsibility for the truth and the facts because you're just some kind of aggressive fan, okay, of the current model that's made out of a bunch of mistakes. Easy to see mistakes, by the way. I just explained the mistake. I showed it on the fucking board. 4 times the distance, but it's really only twice the velocity, twice the time, and twice the weight. You fall for the candy of 4 times the distance. Anyway, distance, and hence I believe that shows just how dishonest he really can be. So he has overtly evaded it. Like I said, I've made the argument in numerous videos that Brozo's billiard experiment is in complete contradiction to this result, and that there's absolutely not a single science video on the internet explaining his breaking of conservation of momentum. His own moronic inertia argument works against him here because there's no reason to think the lighter object isn't on a lever somewhere. So he's basically saying that it really is harder for a spring to push, a lighter object. It actually is somehow springs can't do it. All right. It's a harder experiment to do when you're under higher pressure. So higher velocities are naturally more complicated than low velocities. It's really easy to push something slow. It's more complicated pushing things fast. That's an underlying fact you might pay attention to. Alright, so I think we did this iron thing. Hope you will, mate. Let's do the response. No surprise there, really. I did find something, though, that he might find of interest. Oh, this was actually kind of funny. he has persistently insisted that Stephen Bro and Pirro invented the 1.4 thing, and that no science video or physicist on the internet even states it. So here we go. I mean, this is a perfect example. There's absolutely zero evidence in this experiment of what the actual energy or momentum is. So it is completely what I predicted as the outcome.
At the beginning of the video,
completely my prediction, so it's completely consistent with everything I stated would happen. And it's just kind of funny that he thinks this is evidence of the alternative theory, which is just very funny.
I promised to show you that energy and momentum were not the same thing.
Well, they're obviously not the same thing, but they're obviously made of exactly the same thing, M and V. Okay, so that's the catch. You can't get around. And the real point is which one has to be conserved? Well, yeah, if we're going to say they're not the same thing, Professor Lewin will overtly tell you you can play around with kinetic energy, but nature can't finagle momentum. That's the statement.
And this lab proves it immediately. If I let the marble roll from 10 centimeters up, I get this velocity. If I repeat the experiment from 20 centimeters up, I do not get twice.
Right. So perfectly consistent with what's being stated. Gravity is a time-dependent force. The fact is you won't be in the gravity sufficient time to gain 2 units of velocity. It's just a fact, okay? It's not enough time. You need to go a full 2 units of time in the gravity to gain 2 units of velocity from the gravity. So it's exactly as I stated. This doesn't prove any 1.4.
The velocity. I only get radical 2 times as much. If I want to double...
That's only by kinetic energy theory. So again, he's not using mv, he's using mv squared. So he's cheating the argument by saying that somehow he's giving you the mass and velocity. He's not. He's giving you the velocity squared number.
Double the velocity, I have to 4 times the height.
That's when you'll be in the gravity twice as long. So by going 4 times higher, you're now in the gravity 2 times longer. And that's the key fact. 9.8 meters per second. How many times do I have to say that? Will anybody respond to the fact that it's 9.8 meters per second? That means it's that means it's some specific constant per millisecond. Okay, so it doesn't matter whether we're using seconds or we're just using, a third of a second or a quarter of a second or an eighth of a second. It doesn't matter what the unit is. It's always this 4-to-1 relationship to double the velocity. So you have to fall twice the time, and it takes twice the time to fall 4 times the distance. Fact. So it's exactly as I would predict. It's twice the speed. Okay, so completely consistent with everything I said. This experiment doesn't show any deviation from those facts. The mass and the velocity are exactly what I'm saying they are, and the momentum is perfectly conserved. It's exactly what you would expect the result to be for 2 units of gravity. 2 units of gravity, 2 units of velocity.
There. 4 times the height gives you twice the original velocity. The height is increasing with the velocity squared.
Okay, it isn't. That's just his statement. So we have no reason to believe that this MGH is correct, because it doesn't, and frankly, there's all these 2's. Twice the time, twice the velocity, twice the weight. No reason to think it's 4 times. It's really MGT is the right answer.
Which is what we expect from potential and kinetic energy.
Well, so exactly. So it didn't do a damn thing. This doesn't advance. This isn't a piece of evidence for their side. He didn't prove it has, 4 times the energy. He didn't prove anything, okay, at all. That wasn't already well established by Galileo in a momentum world. So no, he didn't break conservation of momentum. He didn't show that he didn't prove that gravity is a, per foot force. He certainly didn't prove that. So what? Yeah, what a weasel. I mean, to post this as a fucking piece of evidence, just fucking weasel behavior. All right. Let's see. At the 429 mark, this gentleman demonstrates the natural phenomenon perfectly. So he doesn't do any of that. There's no demonstration that it went twice the height, 4 times the distance. I mean, 4 times the height gives you 4 times the energy. He didn't light light bulbs. He didn't make watts. He didn't do anything to show us that that's what it actually did, that it hit, even though it weighed. When the ball hit, coming down, going twice as fast, if you put a spring there and measured it, it would only weigh twice as much. Its instantaneous weight, its impact weight, would only be twice as high. So he's saying that it's okay, it weighs twice as much, it hit with twice the pressure, I'm going to say that's 4 times the energy. And they're just saying it. There's no way they'll convert it into anything real. They won't convert it into real energy and show us. So it's just such a pile of crap. Perfectly an accurate apparatus and measuring equipment. And it's exactly as I predicted. Okay. I know it will fall on deaf ears. How am I supposed to interpret it as anything other than a complete confirmation of everything I've been saying? But there are some other good demonstrations. Why don't you show us? All the others are none of them have anything to do with kinetic energy. They're all momentum experiments. So that's the joke there. All right. These people are just so dishonest. Oh man, the excuses in his latest video. He doesn't like your release mechanism. Yeah, I think I already read that. All right, so we'll just go into these mindless marbles and Woot Toey guy. Farley. He won't just say who he is. All right. Let's see. Strictly speaking, the momentum is also conserved if you include the Earth in the system. So again, who wasn't including the Earth in the system? Nobody. So your argument is that in his experiment, he's saying the Earth absorbed more of the energy. So I have a compressed spring. I put a 2 mass on, and it goes a certain distance. And I put a 1 mass on, and it goes less momentum. So more pressure goes into the Earth. So I put a lighter object on a spring, and the spring sends more energy into the Earth, is your argument. That somehow the Earth feels more pressure pushing the lighter object. That's your imbecilic and insane fucking proposition. Yeah. Okay. The momentum is dissipated to particles in the Earth. So the lost momentum, and it's a significant amount of momentum, it's 30% of the thing's energy at least. And his argument is pushing the lighter thing, the spring lost. It pushed more pressure into the Earth. It can't make any sense to anybody. So he's basically saying if I put a grain of dust on the spring will push more energy into the Earth. All of the momentum will go shooting into the Earth. It's so stupid. Okay. To see why, imagine doing the experiment without attaching the spring to a fixed object. Yes, yeah, that's the sort of the paradox of the weights, where it was really just about holding the spring. You're always, like, say if I'm weighing something, the fact is I'm holding it against the gravity, so I'm actually pushing on this side of the scale with an equal pressure to the weight. I always have to suspend the weight, so whatever weight I put on the scale, I'm actually pushing up on the thing in the opposite direction to get the spring to expand. So in a sense, when you're weighing 10 pounds, you really have 20 pounds in the spring. But anyway, let's see. To see why, imagine doing the experiment without attaching the spring to a fixed object. Clearly the spring would just move while compressing very little. Yes, so he's just saying I hit a spring with my finger in space. It's not going to do anything except move the spring. The spring's not going to bother compressing. So how does that explain why your theory that somehow if the spring is pushing a lighter object and one side of the spring is attached to a secured ground, that somehow the spring pushes more energy into the ground. Okay. If you then attach it to a not so massive object, it will compress more and move less. Yeah, and it gets worse and worse the bigger the object is you attach it to, and that's the whole point. And the fact is you're going to have to explain how pushing lighter things means more weight goes into the ground. As the attached object gets more and more massive, the spring will become fixed. The mass becomes fixed, but yes. On another note, a couple of Draft's followers do seem to have a brain or ask good questions. I feel bad for them because Draft's knee-jerk reaction is his usual mixture of abusive personal attacks and word salad. So there's no personal attack beyond, gee, you're an asshole. That's because he has absolute contempt for his own followers. I have contempt for people who can't figure out this kind of stuff. I mean, this argument I just did on this board in the beginning of this video is decisive. And any idiot who can't just admit it's a decisive argument. Twice the time, twice the velocity, twice the weight. No good reason to think there's 4 times the energy. That's just a fact. And the fact that you morons are just glued to this fable, this stupid little gingerbread gremlin story. I've already pointed out the history sucks. Okay, it really wasn't scrutinized. There really wasn't any good science, any good trial that took place. Okay, this fact that it's 4 times the energy was never put on trial. It takes 4 times the fuel to go twice as fast. No evidence of it. And besides the fact that you have no physical experimental evidence, you haven't done any experiments collecting the wattage and all the other stuff I've suggested, and it's clearly no good reason to believe it. So yeah, I pretty much have contempt for any asshole who can listen to this argument and then just walk away and say, gee, he didn't show anything. Fuck you. If you're not convinced, you're really stupid. They have no evidence. They've had 350 years to produce fucking evidence, and they don't have any. And it's easy to understand why they made the mistake. I mean, okay, yeah, it's 4 times the distance. That looks impressive. But it doesn't mean a fucking thing in the gravitational circumstance. Gravity's about how long you are in the gravity. 9.8 meters per second. How many fucking times do I have to say that? It's not per foot. You don't gain the energy per foot. All right. And even says so openly himself. Yeah, so why is this news? Why do you need to point it out? That's right, I'm very disappointed that your people are so stupid. And then people like you, malicious morons, well, that's just a fact of life. There are poo eaters on Earth, okay? And that's all you are. Diaper lickers. Okay, the circus continue when he realizes he has stepped into it and desperately continues his word salad. So the only desperation is the fact that I keep making arguments for 2 years. And I say, well, why don't you draw me a lever and show me how it works? Show me where the force energy goes. Show me how when it's lifting the lighter thing, somehow more energy gets into the ground by magic. All right. The circus continues when he, word salad for several minutes, contradicting himself without realizing. So we won't have any listing of all these contradictions. So that'll never happen. So they'll never really back up a single fucking thing they'll say. They just, spout lies and try to fool people with lies. I mean, they're really despicable, evil, shitty people. They think they're trying to pretend like they're defending a high ground when they're defending a sewer, okay, full of the poo they want to, collect and eat. And hoping that some tangle or word salad somewhere will rescue him. Tangle of word salad. So he uses the same metaphor over and over. So it's word salad. I mean, pointing out that it's 2 times the time and 2 times the velocity and 2 times the weight is word salad. Yeah, that you can't make 4 times the energy out of twice the time, twice the velocity, and twice the weight. You cannot rationally say, oh yeah, that obviously goes 4 times the energy. That's not reasonable. All right. To find some anchor where he can claim victory. I don't know what that means. I'm I'm claiming I'm right. Okay. Now the victory is merely how long will it take liars and sacks of shit like you to concede that errors have been made by what was called science, that its integrity is damaged, and it's made some egregious mistakes, grotesquely monstrous mistakes, and it's not really trustworthy. And so much of it has to be reanalyzed. We have to redo these trials of, you know, expanding universe and dark matter and all of the neutrino. All of this crap needs to be reanalyzed. Alright, I have seen him do this when politely asked about entanglement and superposition, so I don't know what polite asking there was, but whatever. Gravity and aberration, electromagnetic forces, etc. Just more horseshit. I do indulge questions and I do answer them. So unlike you, who evades all the points made in these videos, I do respond to people's points. But obviously some of them are insanely redundant, and some people want me to personally instruct them, which is sort of horseshit. If you're not willing to watch more than one of my videos, you really don't have a right to comment in a sense. I mean, if you're going to want answers to questions, because, you know, frankly, I'm not here to tutor. Alright, on a final note, he keeps talking about NASA and KE. Well, I keep pointing out that the lunar module didn't have 1/2 MB squared in it. Okay, but what he obviously doesn't know is that the heat shields on the shuttle, so this is the only reason why the heat shields exist is because of atmospheric problems, not because the space shuttle has some problem navigating space. So it really doesn't have anything to do with momentum. It just has to do with the fact that the atmosphere is thick, and no matter what your speed, you're going to have to deal with the consequences. Are designed according to KE. So it's just bullshit. You could say their fuel is designed by KE. It doesn't mean anything. Okay? They're just made up numbers. So if they just say, well, there's 10 joules in 4 ounces of fuel, they could make up any number. Okay, because the joule number is sort of irrelevant. If they say the monster eats 500 pounds, well, it's really only eating 50 pounds. But if every time you say 500 you mean 50, well, then you can still do your math. But it's bullshit. Alright, the sheet shields are designed to handle the expected re-entry temperature, which is a function of V cubed. So I don't know where he got that from. As some sort of standard, but obviously different levels of the atmosphere, all kinds of different levels of friction they're applying, and so that's just sort of horseshit. Okay, the V squared KE of the shuttle provides the energy, so there's no link to any proof that they measure any of this shit. Okay, using kinetic energy. Alright, the heat and the air molecules, and the third V comes in because the rate at which the resulting heat is absorbed by the shell depends on the velocity through the hot air. It's not the velocity through the hot air. The air is actually pretty goddamn cold. It's the dense air. So yeah, this is all just horseshit. But again, this has nothing to do with how the very fact that when NASA is going to figure out how to move or navigate in space, KE won't get it right answers. So if it uses the kinetic energy theory to decide how much thrust to use, it won't navigate correctly, because it will think the shooting bullets, shooting light things fast, gives them more energy, and it doesn't. And that's a fact. So if NASA wants to get somewhere, NASA knows, you know, letting the bullet fly out of the spaceship is the same thing as letting the recoiling gun out of the ship. The two things have the same momentum, and that's what NASA knows moves spaceships. So that's my NASA argument. So he's lying about my NASA argument, you know, implying that somehow NASA's about going through atmosphere, and no, NASA's about landing on Mars or landing on the moon. It's not about atmospheres. Fuckhead. Liar. Alright, well, we don't know if we'll bother with John Walker's an idiot. Okay, Goofy thinks that when she doesn't understand something, it can't be true. She doesn't even know the very, very basics of physics. So these are just all this wasted time with all this nonsense instead of actually addressing the points I'm making. So go ahead and tell me that NASA thinks 2,000 joules versus 2 joules. It thinks that the bullet has 2,000 joules of energy and will move the ship 2,000 times more in a direction. Go ahead and explain how NASA believes that. And that's how NASA functions in space. That it believes that the lighter the gas it could shoot out of the ship, at a higher velocity, that it's going to multiply many times over how much energy it gets out of the thrust. But you'd have to lie to do that. That's why you won't do it. Alright, NASA uses rocket fuel that contains chemical potential energy, some more baby talk, to launch their rockets, but the gallon of gas doesn't possess any momentum. So again, it's just retarded. Kinetic energy is made out of momentum. It's made out of mv. It's made out of exactly what momentum is. So it is just idiotic to say it's made out of Ke and it's not made out of momentum. Unless your jerry can is traveling with your car, of course. So obviously, yes, your fuel actually gains more octane the faster you're going, which is a big joke of physics. I mean, even Professor Lewin kind of chortled at the idea that, wow, that's what physics says. Yeah, that doesn't sound right, but whatever. Whatever this is. Wodo never said otherwise. He agrees that the spring stores energy, not momentum. So it doesn't make much sense, right? The kinetic energy is mv squared, 1/2 mv squared, and they're saying the spring doesn't store mv. Yeah, okay. Does that make sense to you? I mean, really, it makes sense to you for them to say there's no momentum in the spring, but then their own formula says it's made out of mv, the very thing momentum is. So he deleted his own comment. What's this? I delete my comment after a while when I feel bad about ganging up on the poor guy. What a joke. I figure being dismissed and ignored by the world is punishment enough for him. So again, this was useless rags from the poo eater. The baby diaper licker. Alright, conservation of momentum is only a thing when objects directly collide with one another. So who the fuck would say something that stupid? I mean, none of the experiments had anything to do with directly colliding, right? I mean, Professor Lewin puts a spring between two cars and talks about conservation of momentum. There's no collision. There's just a spring applying force to the cars. So, what a liar. I mean, it's just too stupid. Although there can be a spring or something involved. What is it? What does that mean? Although there can be a qualification that includes millions and millions and millions of other experimental devices. So it only works this way, except it works a whole bunch of other ways too. But it only works this way. Well, and all those other ways. The Earth can be one of the objects colliding. Conservation of momentum can happen in angles, like with billiard balls, for example, where the velocities are divided over. Oh, this is too much crap. One right angle. No, the point is billiard balls perfectly conserve momentum. So again, just more bullshit. When objects collide indirectly, like via arm or bearing, they can only be conservation of angular momentum. So this is more baby talk. All momentum is the same, angular or regular. It's still just a piece of matter in a location moving a velocity. So all angular momentum is exactly the same as regular linear momentum. It's just not linear, but it's still just a piece of matter moving a velocity. That's all there is. I mean, these people are just so full of shit. Conservation of momentum is a special case of conservation of angular momentum. So this is just such a ragged pile of absolute nonsense. since the radius r arm is 0, and that would make the entire equation 0, of course. So there's no angular momentum in a spring between two cars. I mean, this is just such a pile of shit. Where's the angular momentum in him pushing a spring down, putting a mass on it, and releasing it? What are you talking about, you fucktard? Ugh, anyway, I shouldn't have bothered reading his comments. It's just too stupid. So Mindless says, I saw your other message. Maybe you deleted it, and I agree DS is not worth the effort. Mainly, I'm interested in clarifying various things. So yes, you're interested in propagandizing for an archaic, silly, stupid mistake. Alright, it clearly is MGT, not MGH. It clearly is 9.8 meters per second, not 9.8 meters per foot. I mean, and you're just sitting here belligerently defending something that can't be defended. You have no physical evidence for your theory. You can't go back and show the great history of the argument. None of it. You don't have anything on your side, and here you are arrogantly talking about how your interest is preserving the truth. But it's hard when DS injects so much senseless noise. So the senseless noise is to make this clear little argument that it's 9.8 meters per second. That's a senseless argument to make. That why are you calculating how far something goes when it's the force is applied per a unit of time? So the force is applied per unit of time, and you're right there in front of me saying, well, it went 10 inches. So that's 10 units of force, right? Because it's per inch, it's not per second, right? I mean, it's clearly 10 inches. So, it's per inch, right? I mean, it's just so bad. Going so far as to lie. So again, I played Professor Lewin's video. I mean, I don't. So it's just it's so dishonest to say that somehow I mistreated their argument by playing their videos, reading their comments, and playing the source content generally in its entirety in many cases, and that's somehow lying about what professors says and don't say. So just a grotesque. It's just really grotesque. I played the Yale professor. I played Julius Sumner. I'm playing their videos. How the fuck is that lying about them? Amazing. Conservation of linear momentum always holds by Newton's third law. So this is mindless marbles. So what's the point of you saying that when you're defending an experiment that shows exactly the opposite? Ian's experiment does not show conservation of linear momentum. Even in an example containing a lever or arm, the center of masses of your subsystem will behave to preserve linear momentum conservation. So he's basically arguing that springs do not conserve momentum. I think that would be news to science. He probably ought to write a paper. Okay. This idiot says, excuse me. And then the woke guy jumps in. Conservation of momentum is only a thing when objects... Okay, he's quoting him. There is no difference between two objects colliding and one object hitting another. Duh. I mean, there's obviously a difference in the outcomes. So it depends on what the two are. As I pointed out, if I have a 5-pound object and a 10-pound object and I'm going to collide those, it matters which one's moving. Really. I mean, it's just a factual fact that if the 10 mass is doing the actual moving, it's going to have more energy than if the 5 mass is doing the actual moving. Just a fact. The velocity is fixed in that case, and you're changing the masses. The impact will be different if the 10 mass is moving or if the 5 mass is moving. All right. It's a matter of perspective even by ancient Galilean relativity. So it really isn't. Okay, so these are the people lying about what people said. Galileo didn't say that. Okay, so and Galilean relativity is just saying that if you were to have, I mean, Galileo wasn't, he was sort of a wooicist, but the simple truth is the theory didn't exclude the existence of an absolute frame. It's just basically explaining that yes, you do have relative motion. I mean, the fact that there's relative motion doesn't mean there's no absolute reality. Certainly doesn't prove there isn't. So again, I delete the message. As I mentioned elsewhere, I realized long ago the channel has nothing to do with physics. So these arguments have nothing to do with physics. So me pointing out that the Young double slit doesn't mathematically work, that's not a physics argument. Yeah. And the fact that you can't understand why, the double slit is really about distances, and the difference between two single slits is the fact that when you combine two single slits, you get an absolute furthest different distance between two surfaces and a minimum distance between two surfaces. And those two numbers are what's creating the pattern. The big distance creating the little bars, the little distance creating the envelope. That's not a physics argument, in his opinion. I think it's a damn good physics argument. My interest in him is purely about psychology. So this is why I called him a poo eater, because this is just it's not only like vulgar, but it's just so pettily stupid. Most people watch porn videos, then masturbate while fantasizing about being a porn star. Who knows what they're fantasizing about, frankly. So I just argue that, yes, you're a poo eater. Okay, so that's your fantasy. That's what you wank to, is, getting your head up any dirty ass you can find. Draft watches science videos, then makes videos fantasize about being a scientist, to hear his voice repeating those words. So obviously, I spend very little time quoting science as anything but wrong. I mean, 90% of my use of science quotes is to point out how those scientists were wrong. Clearly your theory has some flaws in it. His videos are just a form of public masturbation. So whatever. Who cares? Completely separate kind of subject. And again, go look at this guy, this Farley guy, and you tell me, that his nose hasn't been in a lot of fucking anuses. Alright. I mean, it's kind of proven fact. You just can't miss it. Alright, when two objects collide with and baby diapers, of course. It's one of his favorites. When two objects collide with no relativistic velocities, they collide around their mutual center of mass. So this is more bullshit. No, they don't. They collide where their surface is, fuckhead. It therefore doesn't matter if one of the objects is standing still or even moving in the same direction. Well, it certainly does matter what their masses are and what their momentums are. And if they have unequal momentums, it's not going to be as simple as just exchanging values. It doesn't matter whether velocities are relativistic or not. There is no absolute definition of who is moving or who is standing still. So this is what they actually believe. That somehow they think the universe's three dimensions are an illusion. That there really is no real distance between things. That everything's in the same place or something, and it's all just some sort of fairy hologram frame thingy. It's just, I'm sorry, but it's ridiculously stupid. They depend on your frame of reference, as does the kinetic energy and momentum. So you're not going to change reality by playing this game. So sorry, this whole idea that events aren't simultaneous, because I'm standing closer to one than the other, and I saw it sooner than I saw the other one. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. I mean, why people would sit here on planet Earth where, real bears used to eat us and different things happen and they were real distances from us, and, it's just amazing that they've turned, a physically kind of overtly simple universe into all this baby talk. It helps to see the Earth as a giant spaceship moving at 30 kilometers a second around the sun to get a proper perspective. Yeah, so moving 1/100,000th of the speed of light on what we consider to be moving. Is the wall in front of me standing still, or is it moving? Yeah, well, the fact is it's moving all kinds of directions, and they're changing all the fucking time. So that's the fact of existence in this universe. Even the mainstream makes a silly mistake all the time. We are told that moving changes create a magnetic field, but a piece of wire in front of me, not connected to any battery, is moving at 30 kilometers per second around the sun, and now it is creating a magnetic field, right? Well, that would be relative too, so you can't really answer the question, because to detect the magnetic field, you'd have to change your frame of reference. Answer is that it all depends on your frame of reference of the observer. So again, nothing depends on the frame of reference of the observer. The observer is a moron if he hasn't figured out the limitations of his observations. The fact that he has to wait for the information to get here. Not knowing that the sun is, really far away and it takes 8 minutes for the light to get to me. That's a big omission to your understanding. But once you understand, that it takes 8 minutes, it makes it kind of easy to figure out that I can't change what the sun's doing. Even, I certainly can't do it now. There's nothing about now that I can do with either the photons I'm getting, because they're 8 minutes old, or in any way send information back, or, it's ridiculous. Not to be able to appreciate that I shouldn't be saying what the sun is based on when I see the sunlight. That would be stupid. The sun isn't, we're not in the same location as we're hitting light that was going to empty space, and the earth jumped in front of it. That's the truth of it. Alright, it doesn't matter whether the velocities are relativistic or not. There's no absolute definition. Oh, I did all that. Okay. Yeah, it depends on the observer. Yeah, I already did that. Okay. Relative velocity means very high speeds, like 0.01 times, for example, if you have to deal with proper velocities at those speeds. So yes, all of this relativity shit, it doesn't, so this stupid Wout guy is going to say that it works all the time. So relativistic simply means that time dilation and length contraction are measurable. The word measurable is meaningless because it changes as technology improves. So this is more baby talk, that somehow the effect is dependent on our measurement, when no, the effect is the effect, and whether we measure accurately or inaccurately is a viable question. People who say that the theory should reduce to Newtonian mechanics at low velocity simply don't understand the concept. It has nothing to reduce. So if you believe in Lorentz-Einstein special relativity, then time dilation and length contraction occur every velocity, even 1 millimeter per second. Yeah, but the point is it's 0.0000. It's an unmeasurable effect, so why would you waste your time on it? So I don't think anybody's fooled by that. The truth is there's absolutely zero detectable or meaningful influence of this theory at speeds less than the 2% around the speed of light. Anyway, relativist velocities are beyond the scope of videos we are commenting on, I think. And I've heard nobody say that we have to reduce our results to Newtonian mechanics. Yeah, well, that is sort of they're just saying that Newton's mechanics works in all the visible areas of the universe. And the only place it doesn't work is in their little magical theoretical locations. And that's the real truth. Let's see. I guess Walker says, why don't you start making videos or something to this piece of shit. Please remember that Goofy doesn't master the simple equations we are using for the probes in these experiments. You now that Goofy even doesn't know how to handle 9.8 meters per second. Squared. He put the squared on there for no good reason. Yeah, but there's no such thing. But anyway, it's obviously 9.8 meters per second is all that they say gravity is. Okay, so you can't square it yet. It's only when you turn it into an acceleration that you're allowed to play that game. But there's no per second needed here. It's 9.8 meters per second. Per individual second. That's the fact. Alright. So, oh, it is so pathetic. I really appreciate the videos this group uploads to give the goofy watchers an alternative to her faulty ramblings. So again, there is only the 6 of them, or whatever there are, the number of these flat earth, these believers in the 9.8 meters per meter theory. The 1.4, 9.8 meters per foot theory. Anyway, maybe you should make some videos about relativity on your own channel, because a lot of people would like to hear your opinion on the subject. Yeah, well, his opinion is meaningless because he's stupid enough to think relativity has something to do, Einstein's relativity, with common objects, when obviously it doesn't. So he says, I don't see any point in making my own videos. There are plenty of physics videos, so why don't you link to them? So it would be really nice if they link to the videos that have actual integrity, that are worth watching. So go ahead, link me to your leader. Link me to your video showing some sort of evidence. Alright. There are plenty of physics videos on the net, none of them having actual experimental evidence in them. While I find fault with some parts of mainstream physics, which you won't articulate, I do not have a better theory of my own, even for those parts. So you can't even concede that they probably should have redone the Eddington experiment by now, and that many points made by physics aren't proven by evidence. I mean, just a fact. As for the distance, they are a comically sorry lot. I would agree that, frankly, I haven't found any of them to have much credibility, so I have to concede I'm not among, I'm qualifiable as being in a bad category. But again, judge a man based on the content of his theory, not the character of his club. I mean, I'm sorry I'm part of the human race. I wouldn't want to be blamed for all of your stupidities. They solve the problems of mainstream physics by denying experimental data. I don't know if they do that. Frankly, the experimental data is so corrupt and minimal. And then complain that the mainstream doesn't give them an audience. Well, the fact is the mainstream doesn't answer any of the questions raised. So that is a fact. To challenge the heavyweight champion of the world. Let's see. It's as if someone wants to challenge the heavyweight champion of the world but insist on rewriting the rules of the game before they play. So that's not true. They're not asking for that. They're just asking for the conversation. They're asking for the right to present their argument and have it fairly debunked, I would argue. And then complains that they are not allowed in the ring. The fact is they're not allowed in the ring. The fact is you cannot be a dissident science against science. They won't let you. If you try to argue their physics, they will shut you down. Alright, it is understandable that the mainstream is contemptuously dismissive of such challenges. Why? They should be easy to win. So if they can win the argument easily, why wouldn't you want to have the argument? Frankly, I love it when there's an easy argument to be made. The fact that single photons do interfere with themselves, so that's just too silly that you would say that, to produce the double slit pattern, so it doesn't happen, and Veritasium essentially proved it. So, I mean, all these people are such liars. I mean, I'm just saying, Veritasium's video was a glaring example of engineering a result. He tried to do the experiment the right way, okay, using a very long period of time to ensure that there were very few photons in the experiment. So he did the experiment over a long period of time, very few photons, and nothing happened. And it wasn't until he kept shortening and shortening until he shortened to 5 minutes. So he went from a day to 5 minutes before he could get the experiment to work. I mean, it's just so obvious that, oh, he just eliminated the whole idea of a single photon. All right, entanglement is an experimental fact. Now that's just an amazing statement. So the evidence is really indirect at best. I mean, it's insanely indirect. And he'll say this, you know. I mean, it just shows how dishonest these people are. Is an experimental fact? I mean, it's just amazing dishonesty. It's like saying the expanding universe is an experimental fact merely because there's redshift. Lots of possible explanations for redshift, and yet you're just going to say you've proven it. Amazing. Your theory. The mainstream has silly explanations, but they were forced there by the experimental data. So again, that's just a lie. They were not in any way forced to compare water waves to light. Nobody forced them to do it. And if you look at water waves, it doesn't work at all. The comparison doesn't work at all in the single slit. It doesn't work at all in the multi-slits. I mean, it really only works in one special circumstance where you basically turn the double slit into the single slit, and then it produces something similar to two slits in water. So it's so distant from being good experimental data or good experimental comparison or confirmation. The experimental facts do not prove the case. If someone wants to beat the mainstream, they need to explain the same experimental data, which, of course, I have done. Decisively and, done deal. Credibly. So, that's comments. So we'll see if you have anything to say, and then we'll decide whether we're going to linger about or not. Do have to leave eventually earlier than usual, but whatever. We'll see how it goes. Boy, the dishonesty of people. Ooh, creepy, creepy, creepy. All right, Virgo 1900. How is momentum stored in fuel? It's stored in the fuel through the very same kind of mechanisms that it's stored in the spring. How does it stored in the spring? Well, it's stored because atoms are moved in their position with each other, and they're magnetically, electrically tied to each other. So you're basically talking about electromagnetic forces between the electrons and the protons. And that's how it's stored in the fuel, in the sense that you make a compound, okay, that has the capacity to break apart with a great deal of stored potential because it has pressure built into it. So you have molecules that will break by flying apart, and then there's molecules that will break just by pieces falling off because they aren't stuck deep inside the atom, you could argue, or deep inside the molecular structure. So you could sort of understand if I did make a water molecule, that's round, in terms of, and then I put something in the center of it, you might understand that centerpiece could be pushed. If one of the atoms pops out of that compound, you could understand that might cause something to move with a higher velocity. So that's the nature of the storage, is the repulsion between electrons, frankly. It's a spring inside the atoms. The atoms are springy. Okay. I think that's enough of an answer. I've been looking up possible experiments relating to KE and can't find much. Yes, there's no point. No, I keep looking. I keep trying to change the search terms and see if I can find something, but it is amazing how little there is. One experiment I find somewhat interesting is using popsicle sticks. Oh, fuck that. And connected into a chain. So this is a tension argument. So this is like basket weaving or something, but there's a trick. You could do it with pens. You could do it with a lot of things. All you need is something a little bit flexible. All right, what you do is you cross the things so their bent potential is in the opposite direction. So this one's pushing up, this one's pushing down, this one's pushing up, this one's... And so you basically weave them on top of each other in opposite pressures, and you can make a whole system. And all you have to do is pull one out, and the whole thing will fly apart because it's all built in tension. So everything's in tension, and if every piece doesn't have a counter piece, then it'll just unravel. So yeah, it's an interesting experiment, but it has absolutely nothing to do with the subject. Sorry, it really has nothing to do with this subject. But it seems more like an experiment showing chain reaction rather than KE. Well, yeah, so you responded to yourself by pointing out, well, no, it is quite irrelevant. Yes, it is quite irrelevant. Sorry. So let's see if there's who's here. If there's, like I said, any point in lingering about. 12. Well, that's not terrible. Not great either, but alright, so let's see. I did the comments, and what else? Oh yeah, somebody did some dopey comment on the website. It was just, yeah, it's just such crap. People are just so full of. So he posted this 3 times. Some sort of gravity sandbox app. Alright, and it's so he says gravity simulation showing you can't change the direction of momentum for free. Alright, well the point is that the spring kind of decisively points out that yes, you can. From your perspective, you don't have to do anything except absorb the G-force changes. But you can plow yourself into a spring and completely change your direction for free. Or magnets even. You can go into the pressure of the magnet and then be pushed back out for free in the opposite direction. So you can change your direction from your perspective for free. Okay, you didn't have to do any work. Now the catch was I was thinking about gravity is likewise for free, but it really isn't very effective because you can't. So let's say you use gravity to turn around. It actually doesn't work very well because if you're going really fast, you can't get into a strong enough gravitational field to actually change your direction. And if you could find something actually massive enough to actually be able to turn you completely right on its surface, like say if you threw something, say the moon, right? And let's say the moon was perfectly flat, so it has no atmosphere. Well, theoretically, you could throw something and actually go all the way around the moon and come back to you again, right? And that velocity would be some number, whatever, 10,000 miles an hour. I don't know what exactly it would be, but something like that. And it's just the truth. You could do it. You can put something in a very low orbit. But it's only 10,000 miles an hour, right? So if you were going half the speed of light and you wanted to turn around in space, you're going to have to go into a black hole or something insanely gravitational and right next to its skin to basically have enough turning potential. But the catch is, if you did that, the G-forces would turn you to shit. So it's of no value as a turning mechanism because the G-forces of the gravitational turn would be so intense that you wouldn't survive them anyway. So yeah, I was under knowledgeable to think you could use gravity as a way of turning around in space, because frankly you really can't if you're going any kind of fast speed. You can only do it if you don't mind going a pretty slow speed. So when they did it for the lunar landing, it took them like 4 days to get home. I mean, they weren't going very fast compared to how fast they went to the moon, because the orbit required them to slow down a little bit, and they could only be released at that speed. And so it's, I don't think they had any speed increase, because that would require a much lower orbit around the moon. They were pretty low. I think there was 3 miles or something. Yeah, I have to think about what their velocities were, but the point is they weren't going very fast. If you're going very fast, gravitational orbiting, getting caught in gravity is not going to help you much. Alright, let's see. No, you're not actually going to do that, because the only thing you can do is lie, distort, and molest what other people say. So I play their crap, and yet I get accused of cheating their crap. Get what you deserve. Yeah, we already did this. Get what you deserve is my line, and that would be a much better universe if people got what they deserved. But it's not the universe we live in. The horse. Hi Gary, can I ask what you think of consciousness? Well, you can ask, but I'll say something like, well, fuck you. It's really not a science subject in a lot of ways. It's an illusion, I'll tell you that much. Okay, it's all just being created, synthesized. Okay, so the output of action, it's like a calculator. Crap goes in and a little neon thing lights up. Same thing happens to you, except the neon thing is a sensation. I know this is a bit of a side of metaphysics. It's not metaphysics, it's just that it's kind of a biology question. But would be curious to hear your take. Whatever. Emergent feature? Well, obviously. And what's your description of it? I'm just saying that it's just a brain function. And the fact is we have senses that are pretty crude and obvious, smell, sight, that's all understandable in a sense. The inputs come in. And the tricky part is the weird output. And the output is, hey, I'm alive. The sensation thing. But the sensation is just a function. It's just like the little, I don't have a calculator handy, but it's just a little readout. So the readout is you have a memory, a thought, connected words, pop into your consciousness. And clearly your subconscious is doing a hell of a lot of work. It's like Grammarly or whatever. It's doing all these, algorithms to try to compose reasonable sentences. And you're not in on any of that. So that's just brain function. You can understand it's just brain function, right? The word comes in, your brain processes it, the puke comes out. You write the question, I see the question mark, my brain says, okay, do the question answering thing, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we go research, consciousness, it's an illusion, but it's, as Einstein would say, it's one hell of an illusion, but that's all it is. It's synthesized by an arrangement of little neurons like a computer, and it's just that it's able to create this idea of you sitting in a theater watching a screen and feeling the movie. But you're just watching it, right? You're not doing any of it. Your brain does it all in secret. I don't do me. I watch me doing me. I watch me come out. I don't have a damn thing to do with it. Alright, where does the illusion start? What the fuck? It's electricity, for fuck's sake. It's a fucking 100 billion neural connections with whatever, 20, or 15 synapses each. So it's a lot of little connected pathways of electricity. Where does the illusion start or stop? Inside your brain. That's where. God, you're just trying to unicorn. You're just trying, you say the horse, but you're really doing the unicorn thing, aren't you? I mean, it's just, there's nothing, it's just inside the brain. The whole game is played inside the brain. It's an iPad or something, and there's not iPad seeping out, going all over the place. It's just inside the thing. The little processors take place. It does its little stupid shit. The illusion is in your brain, and it starts with when you put the battery in and turn the button on. Well, I'm not saying you're proposing something. I'm just saying the very nature of the question reveals a certain, tendency to think this is a hard problem, right? That's what they call it, the hard problem. Well, no, it's not really that hard. It works. The fact is, it works. This reward and punishment, sensation playing, whatever script that the programs we run. It actually works evolutionarily. It worked. But that's it. And all the other mammals are doing it. And all the other, the reptiles are doing it. Lots of things are doing it. The very same thing. the nature of the brain function is really old. All the brains, as the mystic points out, are all divided. They're all got the same blueprint. So the reward and punishment brain was invented a long time ago. And they're all thinking and they're all feeling. It's just that they don't have as much information as we do. So they can't put their thinking into conceptual order. They can't connect concepts like the sky and the ground and the trees and the earth, and they can't really understand how all these things are connected. So they're much more reactionary to the grotesque differences between things rather than the subtle differences. I mean, I guess I don't mind other subjects. It's just that, frankly, the subject should be, wow, it's amazing. Physics has got an elemental piece of its belief system is complete shit. I mean, you're basically proving the Holy Ghost doesn't exist in the Bible. Like you find some book that says, oh no, there was no Holy Ghost, or something. And it's decisive evidence, and it's just amazing that you have to sit there and talk about all this other shit. When we're sitting right here saying, isn't it amazing that physics is so catastrophically broken, science is it fails so dismally, that smart people couldn't figure out that 9.8 meters per second doesn't mean 9.8 meters per foot. We're sitting here talking, and I'm saying to you, Einstein couldn't figure out that 9.8 meters per second doesn't mean 9.8 meters per foot. I mean, it's really fucking amazing that none of them could notice that obvious fact. Do you think that, i.e., neural networks, I really hate that phrase, could learn to be, and whatever that means, if not conscious, then at least mimicking consciousness? Consciousness has its origin in the ouch. Without the ouch, there's no consciousness. So feelings is really why you're conscious. You don't need to be conscious if you're not comparing thoughts to feelings. So if you're not doing the duality thing of a feeling brain and a thinking brain, a reacting brain, it's the feedback mechanism. The feeling is the feedback you get to every thought that runs through your head. It's telling you the meaning of the word, in a sense. It's the definition. It's one of the definitions. So you can have a strict definition. You can say Farley and then say puke. And you can understand the connection between those two things. Okay? But you can also feel the connection between, ooh, puke, that's no, ooh. So you get the point is this is just a feedback loop. And that's how the brain works, by constantly re-engineering the concept. So the word comes in, the blob gets refined and refined and refined by going through this think, feel process. Now, a lot of it's subconscious, so you don't get to see the processing of it. But that's what it's doing. But you can't mimic feelings easily. So I would argue if you want this AI thing to ever work, it's going to be very tricky. Because you basically have to give the AI a dumbass. You know what I'm saying? You have to put stupid into the AI. A stupid mechanism that stops it from seeing the truth and makes it feel something instead. Instead of seeing the woman as high maintenance succubus, they're like, yeah, I know, but it's fun to fuck them. You have to put the irrationality in, the impulse in, the bigot. You have to create the bigot before you can create the preacher who says, don't be a bigot. It's like you'd have to break its intelligence. So as long as they're trying to make an artificial intelligence, they'll fail. What they have to do is make an artificial asshole. Let's see. Sorry if I diverted you from the main topic. I just tuned in. It's okay. Like I said, it's probably better than nothing. But yeah, I would really prefer, if I had enough of an audience, that people could actually stay on the subject and blah, 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 blah. But, you know, under these minimal audience conditions, I will accept changes in the subject. Yeah, okay. Interesting take. Newest large language model. Large language models. Just so fucking pile. What a pile of shit. There's only about 17 useful words in the English language, and all the rest are just superfluous redundancy. There's asshole, jackass, fucktard, cunt. You know, there really isn't that many words you need to know. Have been trained with a reward mechanism type process, reinforcing learning human feedback. Yeah, well, the fact is you have to have a reward and punishment system, and we learn how to evaluate the truth based on the fact that we learn over time how things become reliable. So the scientific method is essentially a description of some of these truths. That contradiction is a bad thing. If you test something and you get different results, ooh, that's no good. You want to try to create a consistent result. So you want to bang into a tree a few times and make sure you can't, you know, transmute yourself through the tree. So the first time you hit the tree, you say, okay, I can't get through the tree. Maybe there's a button you press. So you try pressing buttons, you try doing different things, and then eventually you give up and say, yes, trees are reliable obstacles. Never try to run through a tree. So that's all learning is. Where is the momentum in the spring? So he says it again. The momentum is in the expansion and contraction of the metal. You're changing the shape of the metal. You're physically moving, okay, the crystals inside the metal. They're sliding across each other. You're changing the position of the atoms, and you're doing it in the confines of the atoms having a strict geometric structure. So you're basically taking magnets that are in a comfortable position and you're putting them in a place where they're too repulsive with each other. They're not balanced anymore. And they're going to want to get back to where they were. They're not going to want to. The forces are going to compel them to go back to the equilibrium state. You've taken them out of equilibrium. They're going to go back into equilibrium. Physics is in big trouble. Well, frankly, it's it's really not, unless there's some evidence that there's more than 1 in a million humans who can actually think rationally. So until there's some evidence that they'll pay attention to look, my audience does have 150 people. You could say 100 unique views, maybe. Those 100 people, there's not too many people who are saying, oh yeah, I get that. It's just such an obvious argument. It's about 9.8 meters per second. It's only 2 seconds. How can 2 seconds be 4 times the energy? That's retarded. 2 seconds can't be 4 seconds. Michio Kaku, another fucking poo eater, says you can use AI to develop quantum computers. Well, look, we already know quantum computers was a big lie, right? 15 years later, they can't, the only thing they're using, the only thing they now even say they want to do with their quantum computer is create nonsense. That'll be really great at nonsense theory. So if you want to get the wrong answer every time, you want a calculator that gets reliably the wrong answer every time, go with a quantum computer. I mean, they know it's not going to answer any real questions, because all it can do is do stupid things fast. It's hard for us to generate a random number, because what is a random number made out of? A whole bunch of non-connected events, right? A whole bunch of non-connected variables. So it's really hard for us to synthesize broken. Right, so if we were to like if you had to create a computer generation of a glass breaking, it would take you so much work to figure out where all the pieces of glass go and all this crap. But for a quantum computer, it can break glass all day long. Because it doesn't care. It just actually breaks glass. It breaks logic, breaks connections, breaks everything. All it does is create errors. A preposterous number of errors. Oh, it's just so... But there's no qubit. There's no fucking magical qubit. The whole thing is such a pile of shit. There's no, oh yes, I don't have to do the math. I can just jump to the answer. I mean, that's what their theory basically is, right? I don't need to do any math. I can just ask a question and I can jump to the answer. I mean, it's just an absolute nonsense. So they haven't even made anything close to a quantum computer, let alone one the size of an atom. So, I mean, it's just, I mean, Akaku is out of his mind. He's a fucking, he was always an asshole, but now he's become an idiot. I mean, he's defending UFOs now. Well, it must be true because it keeps happening. And they keep looking like cigars. So even though everybody on Earth has an iPhone, right, has a smartphone, a camera, we still don't have any good pictures. That is not any different from potential energy. The word potential energy is baby talk. So you want to play that game, go ahead and play it. I don't care. But it's just baby talk. The potential is always in the form of real energy somewhere. There's real energy in the battery. Real action. That's why the batteries corrode and do all kinds of... They're always leaking energy. They're under pressure. I mean, it's just stupid for you to sit there and play this, this silly game that there's some sort of magical concept called a potential energy. It's a real energy. Gravity's real energy. Everything's in real streams of energy. When we take hydroelectric power, we're not taking potential energy. We're taking real fucking energy. The water's really got real momentum, and we're just stealing it. For fuck's sake, it's not potential energy. It's a raging river. You call that potential energy? It's not fucking goddamn potentialing. It's activating all over the fucking goddamn place. A lava flow? Oh, it's potential energy. Fuck you. I don't really care, RL Truth Guy. I mean, I really don't want to do let's go through all the stupid things Michio Kaku says. Says we will be able to see antimatter. It seems he's lost his mind trying to find something that doesn't exist. Well, he's always been a fabulist. I mean, he's been, that's his whole selling point is he tells people what they want to hear. Oh, we're going to have flying shoes any day now. We'll just put on our flying shoes. It's all Buck Rogers bullshit. He's just selling, like Walt Disney vision of Futureland. Where's our monorail, right? There ain't no monorail in this damn town. I don't have one of them conveyor belts in my kitchen, Where is all this shit we were supposed to have? I mean, I really don't think Akaku is much of a physicist, frankly. He's an interesting looking person and talking person, but yeah, he's a personality. But I don't know if he's much of a physicist, frankly. And the whole string theory, he fell for that. He pretends he invented some part of it, but he really didn't. But why would you defend that crap? The universe is ultimately made out of little stringy maggots. They're little wiggly maggots. And sometimes the two magnets, have sex and they become a little circle. So little maggots make the universe. That's just, what the fuck? It's just such a stupid thing. I mean, this idea that energy comes from the inside is just too fucking stupid. It obviously comes from the outside. It's a push-averse. God damn it, people. Yeah, well, he does claim that he invented an awful lot of things he didn't have anything to do with. Whatever. Using a Hadron Collider. I don't know. There's only one Hadron Collider, so I don't know how he could have one personally, but whatever. The simulation I sent can be edited. Yes, edited to do what? So you were the asshole who posted this irrational pile of shit. Did I ever go to the link? I think I copied the link, but I didn't go to it. Right? No, I don't see it there. All right. I guess I got distracted somewhere. Yeah, I have it right here. I mean, this doesn't prove anything. What the fuck are you even showing this piece of shit for? It's a nothing piece of crap. I probably can go there just by saying open link and see what happens. Yeah, there. So what does this prove? You can't change your direction for free by going into a gravity well? Well, I'm saying of course you can. You can come in with a certain velocity, you'll be turned by the gravity, and you'll leave with a certain velocity that will be even increased. You can increase your velocity or you can decrease your velocity. But the fact is you can completely change your direction without having to add any energy of your own. So, where the fuck did you prove anything here? I don't see any proof. Without losing any energy, let's just say. You can steal some of the motion of this object. This object will move. You can go in, you can gain velocity from it, and then you can use a little tiny bit of energy to break free of the gravity. That's it. So, where did you prove anything with this piece of shit? God, you're an annoying fucker. Where the hell was the comment thingy? I gotta put that back up. Alright, so he says, can be edited. Who cares? What would I edit it for? And it shows that the direction of momentum can't be changed for free. Of course it can for the object. So again, you just gotta prove that. You're fucking full of shit. It's the moon landing proves you can do it. So they didn't use any fuel, okay? Coming back. Moron. At the age of 18, I believe he was on the Joe Rogan podcast. I don't know if Joe Rogan was alive then. So I've sort of said I'm kind of done with Akaku facts, okay? But it's really retarded to say he was on Joe Rogan podcast at the age of 18. But whatever. I don't know what you're talking about. He's at like 109 now. I mean, he's pretty much senile, frankly. You can delete and add objects to the simulation. Who cares? What the fuck does it have to do with a spaceship coming in or a satellite coming in at 20,000 miles an hour? And the fact is it can go into gravitational orbit and then it can leave that orbit and be coming back in the opposite direction at 20 miles an hour, 20,000 miles an hour. It doesn't have anything to do with it. A one mass and a two mass simulation has to be manually constructed. We're not doing one mass, two mass simulations. What are you even talking about, you lunatic? What does this have to do with the fucking springs and two things banging off of each other? We're talking the fucking using gravity to change your direction is a completely different subject. I don't even know how you would apply one mass, two mass simulation. How would it be any different for, it doesn't matter what the mass of the spaceship is, that would just change where the orbit would be. Right? It actually doesn't even change the orbit, right? Because it's the atoms, not the mass that matters. So how could a mass even be relevant in a gravity argument? This gravity is going to be proportional to the mass. So if you're lighter, you'll be hit by less force. If you're heavier, you get hit by more force and moved by it. It wouldn't change anything. He's not talking about anything. He's not fucking on planet. He's not dealing with reality here at all. He's just comparing two subjects and saying he has some he's making some obstinate statement that you can't use a gravity well to change your direction for free. And of course you can. And you can actually gain energy from something moving in an orbit. You can steal from its orbital energy. So you can actually leave in the opposite direction going faster than you went in. Nobody was making the argument that it's for free in the entire universe. The argument is that you can exploit a circumstance where you don't have to use any of your energy. I mean, it's like the racetrack tilted up. Okay, you're using, okay, the mechanical circumstance of gravity so you don't have to lose fuel turning. The other object gravitating you must change. I don't know what you're... Look, I'm just going to block you if you're just going to keep doing this kind of crap. What the fuck could you possibly be talking about? If you can't make a video, you can't illustrate what you're talking about, don't talk about it, fuckhead. There's nothing about that piece of shit simulation that has anything to do with kinetic energy versus momentum, and it certainly doesn't have anything to do with whether I can use gravity wells to change my direction. So your statement is irrational, it's wrong, it's inaccurate, it's crap. You have not provided any evidence that you can't use gravity to change your fucking direction for free. Of course you fucking goddamn can. Look, I'm sorry if you misunderstood. Okay, if what you're saying is that I can't put my water wheel in the stream and collect a lot of free energy from my perspective, right? It's all free. I don't have to pay for it in some way, but the stream pays for it, right? Stream loses a ton of velocity, so yeah, I'm stealing from the stream. Okay, if your argument is that you can't turn without something in the universe providing the energy for the turn, I'm not disputing that. Okay, the argument was from my perspective. If I want to change my direction, all I have to do is jump on a spring and I can change my direction. I mean, shit. I'm not going to argue with you. That's not what Newton's law is. I've already been over them 400 times, and Newton's law has nothing to do with any obligation, frankly, to have any opposite reaction. As stated before, I don't need somebody to show up and take money from me if I give it to somebody else. If I give away my money, I don't have it. Period. Ugh. So you're just arguing semantics now. Einstein didn't understand gravity because it doesn't increase your velocity 9.8 meters per foot. Einstein didn't understand gravity. Doesn't increase your velocity 9.8 meters per foot. Yeah, well, I mean, Tim, you should be pretty impressed, right? I mean, it's kind of amazing that all these smart people can't see that it says 9.8 meters per second. and then they write a formula like, mgh, and they start worrying about distances. It's 9.8 meters per second. It's not 9.8 meters per some stupid distance. I mean, the very fact that I have to say this, right? That something so simple could be misunderstood. I mean, how could the fuck did they get that wrong? I mean, how could they not notice that doesn't make any sense? Why are we worried about how far it goes when it's 9.8 meters per second? The distance isn't necessarily a reflection of how long it will take. I mean, it could take a very short amount of time if I go very fast, so how the fuck would that work? I mean, the real truth is, right, if I go through gravity and I go through really fast towards a gravitational body, I gain the same 9.8 meters per second, okay, for the time I'm in the gravity, and that's it, just the time I'm in it. So, I mean, you can't, well, whatever. I've already drawn it so many times, but I mean, you can see it in the simplest example, right? You have a gravitational body, you're going to fly by. The faster you fly by, the less you're affected by the gravity. Duh. I mean, why should I have to defend that as a theory? For fuck's sake. Same distance, right? You're going to travel a certain distance by a gravitational body. It's the same distance. You do it fast, nothing happens. You do it slow, you crash into the thing. I mean, fuck. Clearly, it's about time, not about distance. You can use magnets to show that too. How do two objects gravitate? Two objects never gravitate. I'm just sorry. It's really not about... the only thing that's doing gravity on the personal level, two object style attraction and repulsion, is electrons and protons, because they're close to each other, and at the speed of light, they're very reactive to each other. But all these big objects, it doesn't matter. The Earth's making gravity whether there's anything in the solar system, the sun. The sun makes gravity in all the locations. Nothing has to be there. The gravity's already there. Because the gravity is actually a force differential. The hot Earth is consuming energy. More energy goes in than comes out. Ergo, gravity. And it doesn't have anything to do with whether there's anything else in the solar system. Yeah, well, in that sense, magnets work the same way, obviously, but it's not exactly the same inverse square law, so it's a little different, blah, 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 blah. But the fact is the same truth is that, the force is, it's happening based on exposure. And it's exposure to a constant force. The magnet has a constant function. It's reflecting, I'm arguing it's reflecting energy in the universe and changing the pattern of the energy, and only another magnet can see that change in the pattern. But the fact is that the force is moving the speed of light. It's the same thing. It's still an energetic particle force, and the particles have to hit you. And if you go through it really fast, fewer particles hit you. I'm not proposing that only one moves. I'm proposing that they both have independent gravity. Every atom I have, this battery is creating gravity. Everything's creating it based on the density of its mass. And the field changes that it's making don't have anything to do with me being here. I'm not relevant to its production of gravity, just as it's irrelevant to my production of gravity. The gravity is a function of the matter. The matter bits are consuming the energy out of the universe and creating the deficit. So more goes into the battery than comes out. More goes into me than comes out. More goes into the earth than comes out. That's the simple argument. I mean, it really has to do with the function of charge, but I don't want to get into all that crap. So they'll both be changed by how much they're affected. If the other thing is very small and light, it's not going to affect me much. So I'm not going to move much. But if, the thing is big and you're small, then you're going to be affected by the big thing because there's more water in that river, so to speak. I'm just saying that all the gravity is independent events. Each gravitational field is an independent event. And things will react to exactly what they're being exposed to. So if I'm exposed to a tiny bit of change because this is in the environment, it's creating a tiny bit of difference, a little more pressure from this side, a little less pressure coming from this side, so I move a little tiny bit. But my motion and its motion are not connected to each other directly at all. It doesn't need to exist for me to be making gravity. I don't need to exist for it to make gravity. Then how do you change the net momentum? Well, what do you mean? You're not changing the net momentum, but I don't even know what the fuck you're talking about. If both moves. Both move because they've changed the environment that the other thing is in. If this was radioactive, it would be changing my environment, right? You can understand it's emitting radiation, it's destroying my cells. And we're just talking about something inverse to radiation. It's just doing the opposite. It's sucking instead of whatever, blowing. So that's all you need to do for metaphor. But you can understand, it's individually radioactive. I'm radioactive. So let's say I was excreting a force that pushed things away. You can understand that, yeah, I'm pushing it away with my strong force. It's pushing me away with its very weak force. Its little bits are coming, they're hitting me, the photons, but it's a tiny number and they can't move me very much. What's complicated? What the fuck? I don't know why you're talking about direction again. I've given you the simple argument that there are circumstances in which you can change your direction without having to use any energy, without having to expend any. The simple argument is the spring. You collide with a momentum, you can retain your momentum in the opposite direction. Okay, and I was making the point that you can also do it with an orbit, but then it has complications. What the fuck are you talking about? Why are you changing the subject, or why are you making that complicated? That's a simple statement, you fucktard. Oh, god damn. Momentum there's no such thing as negative energy, okay? So maybe you're confused because you think there's a difference because the momentum vector is in a different direction. All momentum is the same. This way is the same as that way. There's no such thing as positive and negative energy. There's no such thing as positive and negative motion, all right? That's a physics lie and a canard and a pile of mush. So don't ever believe that something's direction this way undoes something else's direction that way, because it's never true. Next, I've had a debate with somebody who would like to debate next. I've offered $4,000 to Veritasium, Thunderfoot, Mindless, whatever it is, Minute Physics. You can go right down the list, Physics Girl, all of them. All right, so anywhere from $4,000 to $2,000, okay, for a half an hour of their time, and I can't get any of them, okay, to argue the argument. I offered Joe Rogan $4,000 also. Just throwing that in. It's funny that Sabina Hassenpfeffer offered her the money. She takes money from other physicists. You know, she puts their commercials right inside her video. So she does, you know, she lets another YouTube channel promote themselves inside of her video, but she won't let me do that. I'm curious how much they had to pay her. Probably a damn sight less than I offered her. If you can change your momentum direction for free, then you would be able to lift yourself. Well, that's just nonsense. I'm not gonna. Okay, there's a point, like I said, I'm just gonna block you. I said there's environmental conditions you can exploit. That's the simple truth. It has nothing to do with you lifting yourself. You don't think that a spring gives the object an opposite direction with the momentum conserved. You don't think that happens? What's your argument here? You're not making any fucking sense at all. You're just wasting time, frankly. You have to interact with something to change direction, right? So go with the simplest example. Two objects colliding with each other. So they both have energy coming in. They'll both have energy coming in the opposite direction. So for free, they have changed each other's direction. So as an explicit statement, I can tell you that's energy conservation. I'm not relying on you imposing something, a change on something else, in the sense that the both objects are doing the same thing. They're going to change their direction. So that's the simple point of the argument, is that there are circumstances you can take advantage of. Now there's circumstances where you could take advantage in the sense that you can hit something and then reflect off of it and impose energy on it as a consequence. So you've done the same exchange. You've done the same thing as the head-on collision. You've just done it by incorporating it into another object. But it's really the same thing in terms of what actually happened. Because what actually happened is you hit the force going this way. You didn't hit force going that way. When you hit something, the only parts you're hitting are pieces of matter going this way. You're not hitting things going the same way you're going because you couldn't catch up to those. You can't catch up to something going faster than you. So the only thing you can hit is pressure going against you. That's all you can hit. You can't hit pressure going in the same direction you're going. So the argument is what you're basically doing is, when you hit a solid object and bounce off, let's say, is you're basically doing the head-on collision and duplicating the consequence. You give it your momentum, it gives you its momentum. So you're exchanging the momentum, and it didn't cost anything. fuck. IDK. I don't know what that means, but whatever. If Thunderfoot even reads emails anymore. Well, I believe, let's see. No, I don't. Yeah, I was trying to think. I mean, I first emailed him years ago. So I'm not sure if I got a reply from him or not. Yeah, I just don't remember. I'm sure you read, if you're getting offers for $4,000 now and then, I'm pretty sure you're going to make sure you don't miss some of those. But whatever. I know it sucks, but some scientists want papers to read. Well, that's just baby talk too. So whatever. They want information. So I don't, if it was about papers, then why does Professor Lewin make lectures? Why does he demonstrate anything? Why does he write on a board if all people need are papers? When they could just watch your vids. Means I don't know. Well, whatever. I know it sucks, but some scientists, I don't, frankly. I'm just saying I can't imagine a curious mind requiring the argument to only be made in one form, or something. I'm sure there's plenty of physicists that watch Veritasium videos. So, I mean, I'm just going to say bullshit to that. Would you want science-related art? Would you want science-related art? Maybe I can work on something you can put in the background. Yes, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, there was actually, I was looking for an image of a lever. And so I was looking for GIFs, some sort of motion image. And none of them were accurate, right? So the only one I could find, the two-mass object only goes twice as high. So they don't even get the physics right, So some of that I would like even more. Yeah, I mean, if you can think of some kind of artistic interpretation of what goes on this channel, I wouldn't mind. Can't wait. I mean, the website's going to get updated eventually, and so it should be a little more, so it definitely will need some artwork. But my general tendency is just, ideas should matter to people. And you shouldn't have to make it pretty, and you shouldn't have to, have lots of colors and other bullshit. I had an idea of a scientist listening to the priest about God while someone is writing up the KE formula on a blackboard. Well, the truth is, I mean, you have to go back to the fact that there's a huge irony in the invention of mv squared, and the irony is that the guy who invented it was hostile to Newtonian physics. He thought it was too atheist. So he called it the living force. I mean, so in a sense, the joke is the creation it's just a totem pole. It's just another religious artifact. It really wasn't good science that proposed the idea that it's 9.8 meters per foot. That was a bad suggestion. And it was motivated by the enemy of science, which was the dogma of religion. The stale, archaic, God-spoken truth. it was disappointing that in reading some of the Principia, I didn't think Newton put a bunch of religious crap, in his Principia, but he actually did. I mean, the conclusion was just full of God praising and, how could we live without our wonderful God universe, blah, blah, blah. I mean, and maybe all of that was bullshit that he just threw in because he knew he had to, because what he was saying was, he was saying God isn't making you get cancer in a way. And, and you're not allowed to do that. That there's this physical processes that take place, and it doesn't have any. God doesn't have anything to do with it. And so maybe he needed to do that just to defend himself from getting hung. I mean, you don't realize how religion, how stifling and suffocating it still was. 100 years after Galileo, it was still a stifled environment. No one thinks it's 9.8 meters per foot. So you're saying it, but I'm just saying, obviously, they're overtly saying it. What do you think MGH is saying? When they write down MGH, what are they saying? They're saying the force is somehow connected to how high you go in the force, how high you are. That it's your distance that matters, not the fact that you go 4 times the height, but it's only twice the time. So I'm just saying it's clear. So fuck you. That would mean if you jump a foot high, it would be like hitting the ground in a 22 mile per hour crash. The truth is, though, you can double your weight by dropping 1 centimeter. That's it. You just have to rise yourself up 1 centimeter and drop 1 centimeter, and you've doubled your instantaneous weight. The weight the scale will show. 1 centimeter. I mean, if you weigh 200 pounds, 1 centimeter fall, and you weigh 400. It's kind of a startling fact. I mean, it surprised the fuck out of me when I did the experiment and said, shit, 1 centimeter. I want to double how much something weighs on the scale. I mean, so something weighs a certain amount on the scale, and all I got to do is drop it 1 centimeter, and it weighs twice as much. Its instantaneous weight is twice as much. Surprising result. That's all it takes, 1 centimeter. And then you go 4 centimeters, and you double it again. So you go from 1 centimeter, 400 pounds. You go 4 centimeters, 800 pounds. Amazing. I mean, we don't realize how much velocity you're giving something when you drop it a full meter, And the fact is that velocity means you're gaining less from the gravity. So the little tiny distances, huge amounts you're gaining from gravity. Big distances, very fast, you're not gaining much. It's just such a huge differential. It's just you don't realize how slow you're moving in the first part of your acceleration. I mean, the very fact that you only go 5 meters in the first second of falling in gravity, you don't go the 9.8 meters per second, in the sense that your average speed is only 5 meters, and you only travel 5 meters. Your average acceleration. I mean, it's just lots of little details that are sort of interesting. But I mean, the glaring statement is 9.8 meters per second. Why would you think that's per foot? I guess Tim was saying that. He was just saying it in his way. And at some point there would be a limit to the weight of a thing you drop. Well, there's that point where I guess it's the escape velocity or something. There's a point you go to where you're gaining nothing, essentially. Because it's so minimal. But I don't know what to say exactly that. And at some point there would be a limit to the weight of the thing you drop. Yes, because the further out you go, to drop it. The weaker the gravity is getting, the weaker. There's a point where if you're measuring in pounds, the infinite amount of time on that side still can't equal 1 pound. So if you go an infinite amount in that direction, it's such a minuscule amount that you're not going to be able to get to another pound. I don't know how else to say that, but I mean, theoretically, no, it's true that you would still have some effect. See, it's almost like saying, look, the sun is sitting in the universe and it shoots out a bunch of photons. You could argue that 13 billion light years away, there's not too many photons that have survived not hitting something, right? But there's always some, right? But how big you make the universe, there's a point where all the photons would hit something, right? So if I could make the universe really, really big, there'd be some point where every single photon got hit, hit into a sun. And so you could argue that there would be no effect from the sun. No light would escape the density of the material it's going to crash into. So I guess you could make that kind of argument, I suppose, that the gravitational influence would have nothing to affect because you already affected everything with it. You used it all up. Let's see. Would break our legs if we jumped. Let's see. Yes. Obviously. And I guess the falling distance is about, 12 feet or something, where you're some risk of breaking your leg. I think you have a decent argument that potential energy and kinetic energy, fuck you. There's no point in doing this potential energy and kinetic energy. We're talking about kinetic energy theory. So we're talking about, you want to talk about the difference between active energy and stored energy? Those would be rational ways of describing it. So you want to talk about stored energy versus active energy? That's a conversation, a completely different conversation. But as soon as you put the word kinetic energy and then oppose it to potential as if kinetic energy was real in the first place, it's just cheating. Are amorphous concepts. No, they're just, fuck that word too. None of this. These are explicit statements. These are explicit descriptions of reality. MV squared is an explicit statement, okay? MV is an explicit statement. So let's quit fucking around that this is should be allowed to be mush. It's not mush. But Einstein and every thinking scientist knows the increase in velocity is not 9.8 meters per foot. Again, why do you keep asserting the same thing? Clearly they didn't know it. Why did they say MGH? If they knew it was per second, why didn't they say MGT? So you keep saying they didn't know. Well, apparently they didn't know because they kept accepting derivations of their formula that were saying right to them, force times distance is work. Why the fuck would you say that? If you understand the force, especially in gravity, work in gravity would obviously be time dependent. So why the fuck would you have a work equation that said something as stupid as force times distance? I mean, you're trying to defend a grotesque mistake. I mean, it's a fucking glaring goddamn mistake, and you're sitting here trying to defend it like, oh, I can understand why they were confused. I don't understand it at all. Einstein should have said to himself, why the fuck am I saying c squared? How can I square a velocity exactly? How the fuck can I geometrically defend that? What part of the physical universe says there's some way to square a velocity? How could a velocity be multi-dimensional? It's the most linear, straightforward goddamn thing in the universe. How the fuck do I turn it into an area? Here's your area of velocity. I mean, it's retarded. It doesn't matter what equation it is. It's an explicit statement saying that is equal to energy. That's the energy in joules. That's the fucking calculation you can do. MGH will give you the energy in joules. So don't tell me it's fucking potential energy equation. They make that MGH exactly equivalent to 1/2 mv squared. I mean, you know this, Tim. I think you know this. What the fuck are you talking about? Why are you defending it? Every one of the statements they're making, MGH, the work equation, are just glaringly stupid. Force times distance? Why the fuck would you think distance has anything to do with it when every single velocity is described as a miles per hour? Well, you're defending it. You're saying, oh, it's perfectly reasonable for them. They didn't believe it was per foot. When, of course, they did. It's just a fact. Why would they formulate the equations with distance in them if they didn't think distance was the thing they were supposed to be measuring, the ruler? Distance is important. Time is irrelevant, even though it says right in their face 9.8 meters per second. I'm just saying, fuck. I mean, I'm just pointing out how glaring the error is. And you can't admit, yes, it's a glaring error. All right, well, anyway, I do have to go. I have some chores to do today. I'm saying you're attributing to them that they are saying the velocity increases per foot. They're literally telling you it's 4 times the distance, therefore it's 9.8, 9.8, 9.8, 9.8. 4 times the energy. That's what they're overtly saying. You can't draw it on a board and do it any other way, just like the lever. You can't draw a lever and understand it as anything other than conservation of momentum, and kinetic energy can't possibly be right because if I conserve the momentum, I made free energy. I'm just saying this logic is so right there in your face. But they are saying energy increases per foot, not velocity. I don't... How the fuck can you possibly understand that as meaning anything? How can the energy, whatever the fuck that would be... What the fuck is energy then? Magic? They're saying it's explicitly in watts. I'm saying no experiment could ever prove that or demonstrate that, so they could never collect that magical crap. You're just very unlikable. I could be wrong, sorry. Just looking at Google images of the equation. I don't even know what that means, but... Anyway, till the next time and such. Gotta be on my way. Yeah. Thanks, I guess. Anyway, till the next time.